class, today we're going to read a book that might make you want to become President of the United States one day. It's called Grace for President. The author is Kelly DiPuccio, and it was illustrated by Leanne Pham. Let's take a look at the front cover. What do you notice about Grace?
She's a girl.
She is a girl. What clues on the front cover might give us hints on what the story is going to be about?
The title.
The title, okay, Grace for President. How does that make you, what does the president do?
President is the elected official that runs our country.
Good job. All right, the back, on the back, it says, where are the girls? That's what Grace wants to know when she sees only boys in the classroom posters throughout this book. So we're going to learn what that means. All right, raise your hand if you've ever thought about being a leader. Have you ever run for class president or led a group project? You have, okay. All right, let's get started. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? That is a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman president. No girl president ever? Grace asked. No, I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. No girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? How do you think she feels right now, finding out that there's been no girl presidents?
Sad.
Sad. Finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace, I've been thinking it over, and I'd like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Wilson Elementary. The snickering in the room stopped. Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Mrs. Barrington asked the class. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be so easy, Grace thought. Why do you think Grace's classmates were surprised when she wanted to become president?
She was a girl.
Because she is a girl, and there hasn't been any girl presidents.
Never ever.
The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, I have invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. What do we notice about Thomas?
He's a boy.
He's a boy, yep. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was the captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be so easy after all, Grace thought. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except for Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 15 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. The number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be a representative for your state. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes, Mr. Waller explained. On election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of the electoral votes, Mr. Waller said. Becoming president really wasn't going to be so easy, Grace thought. Grace came up with a campaign slogan. Make history, vote Grace Campbell for president. Thomas came up with his own campaign slogan. Vote for Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job. What's a campaign?
A campaign is when they are putting up posters, things like that to get votes.
Great job. Grace listened to what issues were important to the students, and she made a list of campaign promises. A peaceful school, no bullies, a cleaner school, no littering, better hot lunches, no more fish stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, fish stick tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons. Thomas made posters and buttons too. Each week, the teachers set aside a time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. Polls were taken, voters were making their choices. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes. After school, she held rallies. Meanwhile, Thomas was not worried. He had cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more electoral votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment. After school, he played soccer. It doesn't really seem like Thomas is worried about losing, does it?
Doesn't.
Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad, she organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. In early November, Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. We've been learning about what an assembly is. Can you tell me what that means?
When a group of people get together to vote for something or to celebrate something or to somebody give speeches about something.
Great job. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellow Hammer State of Alabama cast its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. Fletcher said, the last frontier state of Alaska cast its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. Hannah called out, the Grand Canyon state of Arizona cast its 11 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. And so it went. State after state after state cast their electoral votes. The scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of all the totals. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. The Badger state of Wisconsin cast its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had a total of 268 electoral votes. She had 267. How many votes did it say they needed?
273.
Good job. There was only one state still unaccounted for, Wyoming. Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam walked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas and then he looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's handmade flag. Sam didn't say a word. What are you waiting for? Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The equality state of Wyoming cast its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. Why did you do it? She asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. Because, he said, I thought you were the best person for the job. The following week, students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be President of the United States. This time, everyone believed that she would.
Okay.
Why do you think the author wrote this book?
To educate children on the electoral process, but also to empower women and to choose. You should vote for the best person, not man.
What qualities do you think made Grace a good leader?
She listened. She campaigned. She made signs and assemblies and all that. So I think she did a much better job.
Do you think that you have those leader qualities too?
Yes.
How could you be a leader in your class or community?
By community service, listening in class, being a good student, doing my homework, speaking up against bullies.
Great job. Okay, turn it off.